It was always important to me from the very start of what I conceived to be alternative records that I wanted to bring in music that could be discovered and understood and shared by people from across different life experiences.
Hello, I'm John J. Thompson, and on this episode of the True Tunes podcast, I am once again joined by our good friend Randy Layton of Alternative Records, with a hard but inspiring story as he prepares for his final exit from this earthly stage. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you've heard me talk with and about Randy several times. He was one of my early mentors and advocates in the trenches of faith-based alternative music in the 80s and 90s. But if you're new to the show, I invite you to settle in and hear from a true lifer, a super fan of great music and underserved artists. He is a man who is so passionate about soulful rock and roll that working on obscure reissues that only a few hundred people will ever own might be the main thing that has kept him alive for the last couple of years. Now that is passion. As the founder of Alternative Records, Randy worked closely with the Exit Records artists out of Sacramento, most often the 77s and Steve Scott. He put together some of the coolest compilation albums ever produced in alt-Christian music circles, and also worked with an amazing power pop band called 2 Pound Planet. In addition, he was closely involved with one of the lesser-known Exit acts, Robert Vaughn and the Shadows. His reissue of their epic 1987 album Love and War exceeded all expectations a couple years back, and he is now working on their even more obscure 1991 album Songs from the River House.
I rode down to the crossroads with a suitcase in my hand. I see in Carolina, baby, that's where we'll make our stand. When the river starts rising, that's where I want to be. In the heat of your summer is the thing that sets me free. Someday
Randy's health has been precipitously declining for quite a while, so when he told me that he was about to enter hospice care, we decided to set up another call. So, on this episode, we will talk with Randy and his son Matthias Layton about handing over his legacy, what this passionate work in obscure music for 50 years has meant to him, and what it has been like for Matthias to grow up around this scene. And instead of creating a jukebox feature, Bruce has collected some of the coolest Alternative Records cuts ever, including several tracks from the forthcoming River House reissue, and we will feature them throughout the show. Our Patreon members will be receiving an exclusive, high-quality download of this Best of Alternative Records mix as well. So, thank you, Randy, for making that happen. It all starts after we take care of a little bit of housekeeping.
Hey, this is Mark Feldbush, and I'm a supporter of the True Tunes podcast. I've been reading True Tunes since it was a print journal and first on the interwebs in the late 90s. When the podcast became a reality, well, I knew I wanted to be a part of this ongoing conversation. I'm glad to say that folks like me and many others support the podcast with monthly donations of $5, $10, even $20 that help to cover the costs of producing and hosting the show. As a thanks for our support, we get early access to episodes and high-quality lossless WAV files of each episode that we get to download. We also have occasional Zoom meetups, some special live streams, discounts on True Tunes swag, and a whole lot more. You can join me and the other patrons by visiting patreon.com/TrueTunes, or you can find the link on the show notes page. If an ongoing patronage thing isn't quite right for you, but you'd like to give a tip to help with the costs associated with this show, you can find links for that at the show notes page. Thanks for listening.
Randy and Matthias Layton joined me without a lot of warning on a recent Saturday morning via Zoom. So let's head into our virtual interview suite and hear what they had to say. This is different because this is less, in my mind, this is less of an interview and more of just friends talking. But you had mentioned wanting to try to get the three of us together just to talk about, torches being passed and the project and him getting to know me and a little bit of our background. And then you said yesterday or the day before, hey, the time is now. Like, let's talk soon. And I was like, oh, yes. Yeah, okay.
And now you know why. So, yeah, the first thing I wanted to do was just make sure you guys were introduced. We can talk a little bit about how long we've known about each other and what that's meant, I think, for each one of us. And because Matt's doesn't have any history in this. I mean, he doesn't have any history in terms of knowledge of the culture, CCM, or any of that stuff. He just knows about the bands he's been around because they're the bands I've been around, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so he's been exposed to bands that are on alternative or adjacent in some way, DA or, choir or what have you. But he's not going to know about the deep history of the thing. So that limits him, well, in some way, I think that kind of frees him a little bit and that he can promote things that he really believes in and not have to worry, and not, I think too much about where they fit into the, pantheon of the CCM, but he needs to be aware a little bit of that culture as well. But his memories of this stuff are different than mine. I mean, mine are being knee deep in being in the studio with the guys who are choosing material or helping master or all those things that you do, on the label end. He's got different memories. So you might fire some of your first questions at him. I wanted people to be introduced to him because if there's anything happening in the future as far as this label goes, and I hope that there doesn't have to be, let him know that too. If he wants to, he can. And we're in the process of getting things transferred over so that he can do that. I'm going to try to hang on for a while so I can help him shepherd this through a bit, but I'm really tired, really worn down. This is it. It's getting worse. Just explain a little bit about what that is to people. Keep praying, but maybe these are the things to, pray for.
What is precipitating exactly the handing off of this? What's going on with you right now? What's the situation today?
So the situation is that 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with something called multiple myeloma, which is primarily known as a blood and bone cancer. When you get the diagnosis, it's not a good thing because there isn't a cure, and you're told that. There were always things on the horizon that never quite developed in terms of possible cures. Like within 6 years or 7 years, we'll have something. No, we're not there yet. So what happens for most people is over time, they have lesions eat away at their bones. They wind up with, blood issues that can be fatal, or the kidneys might fail. These all tend to be later term things. You do chemo for a long time. There's various methods of doing that. And we've had success at different times with it, to the point where it's been beaten back a few times. We're at a point now where it's not being beaten back. It's been rather aggressive. Everything was difficult with this disease in terms of pain and, lesions here and there that were causing pain, like in my hips or my back or what have you. But in October of last year, there was a catastrophic event where all at once, when I stood up, a number of bones cracked in my lower back, and that was it. Not only was it the most excruciating pain I've ever could have imagined, I couldn't sit, stand, or anything. So it was just yelling, getting to ER, and just being dragged up to the gills to get through it. Eventually, I got sent back home. It took a long time, but eventually I got surgery to put, some sort of cement thing around the bones that had fractured. That allowed me to get around with a walker, but I lost my ability to be mobile and drive and those kind of things. I mean, it's pretty horrible. And there were other things that went along with it that were really bad. And so at the end of last year, I considered hospice because it was just too much. And yet I had this Fontana Salisbury project, as you recall. And we were right at the end of that when this kicked in. And fortunately, I was able to hand off some last minute details on that to a couple other people. And I'm glad I did. It got well received, it sold out. The artists were immensely pleased, including their families and things like that. It was, and I've become friends with them and all that. It was just a really good experience. But coming into this year, it was like, well, okay, so that's really going to be it. Then I started feeling better. I just started having more energy and began to think, well, what would be right now the next thing I would like to do? So that became thinking about Robert Vaughn's songs from the River House as a 2-record set. And I would be able to add on some extra material that was never on CD and that kind of thing. And then at the same time, train Matt, if he wanted to do it, to help learn how to do something like that. And I've been asked over the years by many people for a vinyl version of this. And I just thought, well, it's a small number. People seem to be into this idea. Sure, why not? It's taking Michael Rowe's original master and improving that a bit. I knew at some point I was just going to hand everything off. The recent troubles I've been having are telling me I'm probably going to hand off a lot earlier. It's quite possible I might not even see the project itself. But I want to make sure that I give everybody the tools to make sure that it comes out. So that's kind of where I'll leave that.
All I wanted wasn't meant to be. All I wanted didn't happen to me. Won't be a hero or a champion. I'll score a 0 'cause my game is done, come and gone.
I want to shift over and ask Matthias a couple questions here. So Matthias, tell me about your perspective on your dad and this music, and as you've been coming up watching this, tell me your perspective on this whole thing and how that's ebbed and flowed over the years and what brings you into this now.
I'm still kind of figuring that out, actually. It's something that obviously I grew up with in the house, and with my dad. It wasn't just obviously the music that he was working on or associated with for work, but it was obviously a passion of his from the time that he was a kid. And so the house was filled with records, and there's just constantly music on, and so that was just normal growing up. And to some degree, I didn't think much of it, but I remember growing up and not a lot of kids had their own portable record player, and copies of Sgt. Pepper and a copy of the Chipmunks Sing the Hits or whatever too. And I think Joy Division as well was in my collection, which is just a strange collection for a 5-year-old. But anyhow, getting immersed in that stuff, it's just in the house. I grew up with it. So I didn't think a lot of it. It was just what happened, and him working on albums and, sitting in the living room playing Nintendo or playing with a little brother and hearing, the first 10 seconds of a track 20, 30 times in a row, it was just normal. So I probably didn't appreciate certain elements of the music like taking in a whole record or taking in, different things between tracks. It was just kind of always in the background. But as time goes on, I kind of look back and see like, oh, that was a lot of work. But I began to appreciate it more as I got into my own music that was interesting to me, and then kind of comparing that to things I grew up with and seeing that, oh, okay, things I'm interested in now as a young adult or older, I can trace some of that back and see influence from when I was a kid. And I go back and listen now, out of nostalgia, but also appreciation sonically and for the music, for things like the 77s or some of the Steve Scott stuff and Robert Vaughn to an extent as well. So, as I'm older now, looking back on this stuff, I have a greater appreciation for the music itself and also what it took to get it out there and the work that he put into it. So, as things kind of move forward, it's kind of his legacy. So, as he's described, it's not going to be long before he's not working on this stuff anymore, to put it simply, and but the name will still be on those records. And I've as an adult now, in the house when he would work on them, when it was done, it was on to the next thing, and then we just didn't hear that again really, and you don't see where it goes. But now with social media and being a part of these different Facebook pages, I can see there's a lot of appreciation out there from people who I don't know and that even he really doesn't know, who have strong feelings about some of these albums that he worked really hard on. And so when he's gone, that's still important to me, that people who have fond memories or really appreciate these records still have some connection to it. And it's really nice with the social media age now, for all of its pitfalls, that people can have access to the artists and the people involved with the music that they really appreciate. And that's something that I know that he does now in communicating with fans of the music from over the years. And I think it's something I feel, I don't want to say necessarily a responsibility for, but an appreciation for that. And, in being able to communicate with people who appreciate those records long-term, and, possibly put out more projects in the future for those who would appreciate it. It's a way that I can, honor him after he's gone.
Love can be cruel, love can be blind. If I had more love, I'd make you mine. As I endlessly look, I can't help but stare. The way you look, I still can't compare. I wanna tear away all your teasing, baby. And don't let me waste no time. And as I watch you dance underneath that moonlight, it left me feeling so hypnotized. And then the way you move leaves my heart in twilight. Nothing here could ever feel so right. I never knew you could love me like you would. I never knew you could love me like you would.
What's kind of cool, I mean, it's interesting. I met Randy probably I was about 16, I'm thinking, 15 or 16. I'm younger, like I'm kind of splitting the difference between his generation and your generations. I'm 53 right now. And to me, he was always like the cool big brother that like had the great records and knew all the secret passwords and could introduce me to the cool kids at school, even though both of us horribly miscalculated who the cool kids at school were. we chose the most obscure gang to run with in the possible universe. But there was an aesthetic that was definitely musical and it was based on that, but it was also spiritual. There was this thing that some of us, this kind of cadre of people, we found each other and we were saying, okay, well, we've got we didn't ever really talk too much about what our theological minutia, like I wouldn't know if Randy was a Presbyterian or a Methodist or an Anglican. Like, we didn't really get into the weeds about stuff, but it was just like, there's a pursuit of bigger questions that are spiritual in nature and a pursuit of musical excellence that went beyond this idea of Christian and secular and market kind of stuff. And I needed to find those kind of role models and those people that could help me, because I was not satisfied with the Christian secular CCM thing. That was never interesting to me. So as you were coming up and starting, like, let's say when you were, a teenager, young adult, and you're starting to go, oh, wait, there's more to this than just music. Like, there's some other dimension to this that's making these people so weird. It's not like he's just selling Beatles records on the internet or something. There's another angle. How did the sort of spiritual dynamic of this fit with you, sit with you, dawn on you, make sense to you, and all of that, especially vis-a-vis the particular artists that were in your orbit?
One of the things I found growing up, and I think it was as a young adult, maybe late teens, where I just kind of found a more spiritual attraction to music. I started to recognize, besides just liking music, what it did for me, how it made me feel, that's something that, as I kind of recognized that, it helped me grow spiritually. And I look back at, I probably, a great example, hearing Pet sounds all the time. And, as a 10-year-old, it probably didn't mean a whole lot to me. But, as I got older and had my own experiences, all of a sudden things like that started to make sense to me. And it started to, kind of justify feelings and associations with the music. And so, I was able to, as I kind of, a lot of people, you grow internally and spiritually, you start to associate certain things with those feelings. And for me, that's music. And so, as I got older, kind of looking back on, for me, some of it is nostalgia, and it goes back to like the 77s, for example, and Mike Rowe being around. And I have a lot of fond memories of that, of those times. And that music was kind of a soundtrack to those times for me. Like, I can look back and with a fondness for certain parts of my youth, and that music is there. And so I do have a very strong spiritual association with some of this music. And, I would like to think that it's not just because that music was there that I it's the soundtrack for some of my youth, but just because it was really good. And, there's love associated with it, because that was a feeling in the house with that music, with my dad, what he's putting into it. And so it's kind of hard to quantify all of that, but there's something strong and spiritual there that has existed for a long time with some of this music and my dad and the label, and will continue to be that for me long term.
Why don't you hang around me? Why don't you hang, baby? Hang out with me. Well, sooner or later you get sick of me, baby. I'm sick of being guilty. There's nothing. I'm in love with gas, my glow, turn me up, but I never go. Oh no. The best thing moving through. Right. Yeah.
So Randy, it seems to me that having these projects to work on, obviously for 40 years or whatever, you've had a disproportionate commitment to obscure projects.
Or
it's not
a curse. however you want to put it. Yes.
Right. It's not like either of us are. This is definitely the pot calling the kettle black here. But
what can I do not to make money? Randy
right,
said,
exactly.
I will do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're both drawn to these things because of deeper meaning and all of that. But it seems that in a deeper way, in the last few years, having these projects to work on seems to have given you something to hang around for. Is that?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. I mean, I have other interests besides music, believe it or not, and I don't believe that music is more important than family and things like that. I mean, there are really more important things than that. But in terms of, having an interest that keeps me going when I'm hurting, depressed, down, it's invaluable, So finding things like music was a good way, to find things to keep me going. Could have been books, it could have been a lot of other things, but as you know, my father was a musician. I grew up around music at a very early age. Literally from 1963 onwards, I was getting records given to me. So that was just always going to be there. So yeah, I'd say that was
having
fair.
These projects. Does it help you think about something? Does it give you something to do and focus on that's kind of outside of the suffering?
Well, the frustration with this current project is that I'm not there like I was with Love and War or the 2 Pound Planet project. From the very outset, where I'm really doing, the lion's share of the work. I'm tracking down tape from all over the state or states, and doing all this research, working on, mixes and writing stories and all those things. I love to do all that stuff, and I can't do that with this album because I have limited ability to be engaged. I just don't have the energy for a big part of it. So my ability to do a lot of things you have to do to make these things happen is just limited. And I'm doing some of it, but I'm also having Matt and having a couple other friends, that we know get involved in doing their part. I just want, I would love to see it happen. If it doesn't happen, that would be pretty depressing in a way. But, I could have chosen easier projects. But at the time, it seemed like a pretty easy thing to do. And it just wound up being tougher than I thought. You also have, remember, just like I did with Love and War, an artist who isn't available, will not reach you, talk to you, although he's very aware of the project. And it makes it more difficult to get some things done when you don't have cooperation in that way. But I still want to do it for him, I mean, that's a big part of this. I just thought this album deserved better exposure than it got. It's not like with this particular run of the project, it's going to get much more than it did previously, obviously. But still, I'm hoping that it helps, keep it alive somewhat. Hope that Matt goes on to do things that actually, will make some money and by the same token, make people happy. But this was supposed to be a very short run thing, and then I was going to move on to a couple other things I had in mind that were very, very exciting to me. But yeah, the recent health downturn has turned things a different direction. So I don't really know where it's going to go after this.
Everybody's hoping for a brand new day. Everybody's watching while the horses turn away. Desolation goes down in Desolation Street. I stand beneath the silence with the angels at my feet. All these people innocence and the pressure of the heat, with the memories of these dead ghosts still lying at my feet. This world seems like a ghetto, dressed in gypsy wind, like diamonds and ashes, they'll be the same in the end. All these people, look at them, they got dreams too. And once in this lifetime, I got to give to make it through. All these people, look at them, they got dreams too. But once in my lifetime, I got to give to make it through. Hey!
We're going to step away from my conversation with the Laytons for just a moment, but we'll be right back after this.
Hey, this is Ray, and I'm a Patreon backer of the True Tunes podcast. I have also left a rating and review of the show at Apple Podcasts. It wasn't that hard. It didn't cost me anything. But this show means a lot to me, and I know that reviews and ratings make a big difference when it comes to how and if others discover these conversations. Would you take a few minutes, maybe even while you're listening, but please not while you're driving, to leave a rating and review? Even if you don't listen on Apple Podcasts, the reviews posted there push out to podcast platforms all around the world. Oh, and take some time to tell your friends about the show. Let's drive those numbers up together. Thanks.
And we're back with Randy and Matthias Layton of Alternative Records.
Found my way to Tuesday's garden, investigating loneliness, despair. Well, on my way back to tomorrow, I wouldn't expect to find you there. Now I have heard that they are searching for a lifetime life, or selling off tomorrow's dreams. We all know there's no waiting for forgotten time, preserving justice as it seems. Okay.
Matthias, when you think about carrying the torch here, are you looking at this as something that can continue beyond this project? Are you kind of becoming a indie record producer, project manager guy in this process?
Possibly. Like you said, I'm kind of getting a look at this thing sort of halfway on the sideline, halfway helping out. You know, it's for a long time now, music has been very important to me, whether that be just kind of goofing around myself with things or, like I mentioned earlier, just what music has meant to me in my personal life and my growth. And, you know, but it's never been anything. I've never been a talented musician. I've never had any kind of an in or anything like that. So it's always been kind of from the sidelines. However, getting involved now, I'm starting to see, even if we are just looking at reissues right now, I'm kind of starting to get a glimpse of what the processes are, starting to get connections, at least within this space, associated with his work. And so it's kind of basically opening up a door. And I'm kind of in that room now looking around and go, okay, what do I do now? So I see a lot of opportunities, and there's a fabulous network of people associated with his work previously and within some of these genres that I look forward to really exploring those relationships and getting, you know, and everybody has been so gracious so far that I've been kind of talking to, including yourself. And, you know, I feel like there will be a lot of help down the road. So I don't feel like I'm going to be on an island if I choose to continue doing these things. I think I'll have support. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see what comes next, because I don't know, but I know there should be something, and I want there to be something, because it's for like him putting this out, this Robert Vaughn project. So in the future, if there are other projects like that, it'll be, you know, a labor of love to for me, things that I might be passionate about that, like my dad maybe didn't have, some of those groups didn't have the support that, he saw in them what other people needed to see. So I would probably take the same angle. It's not, this is not a business thing for me to carry this on. It's a hobby and a passion project. And I'm curious to see what comes next. In the short time we've had this thing up and running, and looking, as I mentioned, some of the social media groups where you kind of, see the audience a lot closer than I guess in the old days when, he talked about putting ads out in mailers and things like that. You actually get to interface with that audience. It's a very passionate, very supportive audience out there. So it's really cool to see that.
Take my hand across this great river. Take me down and steal love upon my very soul, and we'll be one, a heartbeat away from forever, and we'll be that one, a heartbeat away from forever.
So Randy, I guess to wrap this up, first I just want, I know that you've told me, because we text back and forth all the time and send messages and stuff, and but I want to just verbally, on behalf of everybody that's listening to this, make sure that how much everybody loves you and appreciates what you've done. Not just that you've made these cool records. I mean, that's pretty awesome, and we love that. But there's an intangible thing, that is more important than the tangible things. The tangible things, like the records, they're great, and yours are many of the best ones. But I think they're some of the best ones because of the intangible things, which is the stuff I'm getting at when I talk about being a teenager and kind of meeting people like you, and Bruce Brown, who's my partner in this show, people that took me under their wing and were like, oh yeah, no, I'll take time and talk to you. I'll give you some advice and tell you some cool stories, and just make you feel on the telephone like you're worth talking to. That there's intangibles like that that's the love, that's the passion, that's the secret sauce, whatever you want to call it, that makes this whole thing. I feel like the records are often an excuse for us to have a reason to keep talking to each other. Like we keep gathering around these records, like we kept gathering around Cornerstone, or we kept but really it's people, and that's the point. It's human connection. And so I hope you feel that love and affection coming your way as you're going through this valley, because we hate that you're there. We absolutely hate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. And just make sure I get into that updated version of your book.
Yes, for sure. I feel like the podcast has already reached way more people than the book ever did. So,
I know.
we've probably made up. Yes, for those.
It's not like I needed to give you a hard time about that, because I remember when I bought the book and went, but where am I? But
yeah, right. Yeah, Matthias. I wrote a book, 25 years ago, called Raised by Wolves. That was a history of Christian rock, and I was 27, 28 years old when I was writing it, and I'd never written a book before, and this was I had a computer that I wrote it on, but just the ability to keep track of that much information, and somehow I completely spaced on it.
No, I've over the years I've been very proud to see where you've taken the True Tunes ideal, in fact, have resurrected it now in this current time in a different form. I miss the old news Brent, but this is better, and I like what you've done with it.
Well, thank you.
And I hope that you get to do this another 30 years.
Of marching round these walls.
the beautiful thing about Cornerstone was that it pushed us all together into this field where everybody kind of had to negotiate, for space. And so you were exposed to, you went there knowing you were going to see some music that you wanted to see. So, there might be 5 or 10 artists that you were really excited to see, but then you were going to see 20 or 30 things that you'd never heard of. And younger people were going to see middle-aged people freaking out for something that they didn't know. I mean, I remember kids there was an aesthetic there of discovery and of fraternity and community, and people went there with an open mind and open heart. And yes, there was things that they knew that they wanted to hear, but they were going to bump into stuff and people that were outside of those margins, and we just don't have that anymore. And so the challenge is how to accomplish that. And I'm working on it. I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to do it. And now working with college students, I'm able to kind of introduce some things, and I find that they're interested if you can present it to them in the right way. But even the old school fans, I would say the majority of them are usually thinking in terms of, I've got so many dollars and I want to get this for my collection, and it's very transactional. It's not the same as I'm going, and some of them on the other hand are like, hey, I just have money and I support this artist and I just want to give my money to the artist, and they're thinking of it missionally, like I don't care what I'm getting for it, I'm just giving money because this artist needs it more than I do. There's both of those extremes going on.
We'll take those guys too. But.
Yeah. Well, no, those are fine. I mean, I love that, but what we need are environments. We need ecosystems where those passionate, missionally minded fans take a teenager with them to the show and say, now watch what's going to happen here, like this, and kind of coach them into becoming fans. But by the same token, older people need to listen to younger people's music and sometimes go, oh, I didn't think I was going to like this, but you've got a point. This record is really good, or this artist is really good. And because it went both ways at Cornerstone. Like, I discovered things as I got older that younger people were turning me on to stuff all the time. My own kids grew up at Cornerstone, taking me to see bands all the time. Oh, Dad, you got to see this. You got to hear this. It went both ways. And we need that kind of community. But that's just one more example of how this virtual version of community we have on the internet is a very poor substitute for the real thing. So I think there's a long answer to a short question, but somewhere in there is the thing. And we might not do it at scale. We might not be able to do the bigger version of it, but I'm trying to still keep the sparks out there so that in small versions, at least, it can happen. And I don't care if we ever have another big, massive Cornerstone Festival again, but if we could have 10 smaller events like that around the country, we could see a situation where that Robert Vaughn music or that 2 Pound Planet music could get discovered by young people who hear it afresh and start covering those songs with their band and start, that's what I think could be really cool. There needs to be a much bigger audience for this. It's dwindling because there's no pollination going on to the next generation.
Some people fill their lives with money and things. They think that pleasure is what luxury brings, but then they find those things don't satisfy. You're the one who really matters to me. You make a difference in the things that I need. You're all that it takes to get me by. I need you like a free bird needs the sky to spread his wings and fly, to show to all who see that he is free. I need you. I need you. I need you. I need you.
Really quickly add, how much hope do you have in, because this really bothers me, that we've evolved so much in the last several years into being a country full of silence, right? We've gotten very good at silos within silos, where people just don't find ways to relate to each other anymore because everything's gotten so politicized, especially, on social media. I mean, almost like what else is there? But so those people that you wouldn't agree with so much back in Seastone, 25 years ago or how long it's been, you wouldn't have engaged as much with them on those kind of topics. It just wasn't in the air. You just got together and went, that's a pretty good band, or, yeah, I agree with you on that thing. And it seems now that as I watch some of these conversations take place on social media, where it's like two guys both love the choir, but boy, did they hate each other. Why? Well, because there's this division, and there's more and more and more of that. I mean, I had a guy who died recently, and I can't even tell you what the topic was, which makes it even sadder. It was just something where it wasn't on my page. It was probably on some other, 80s theme page or something, musically. But someone made some kind of, political comment. The guy in question was a very, very conservative Christian guy who could go off on you, but then eventually back down, and then you could talk about, what a great record Terry Taylor just said or something. But in this case, he just got upset with me, and I've known this guy for years and years. And he basically told me that, I can't believe what you're saying here is to, you're quote unquote batshit crazy. I'm going to drop you. I'm going to block you, all this stuff. And it just floored me that would be the reaction. I said, look, man, I didn't go on your page and do this. I don't follow people around and do that. I just made a comment here, but you've gone off the deep end. I'm really, really sorry. I don't know what he saw, because that blocking was pretty immediate. So it made me sad, when within weeks, he was dead. And it was just like, I know he's in a better place and all those things, but I could not believe that a years-long friendship that where the commonality was music would have turned on that.
Actually, I got into quite a few pretty heated debates at Cornerstone, even about political things. And I'm glad that I did, because I feel like sitting around a campfire or late at night, and I had some really wrong-headed ideas about things, and I was glad to be around people that had enough patience with me and grace to correct me or debate me at least. But the spirit of it was, we can handle that, and yet we're still in community with each other. One of my best friends was Brian Healy. And Brian was like one of the most hardcore left-wing guys I knew. And I loved to argue with him about stuff, because we could do it as friends. And he was right about stuff that I was wrong about, but sometimes I think I could land a point or two. And, but that was a different era when I think that, well, here's the last thing I'll say about that. And this is where I think alternative records is part of the solution, or at least part of the chemistry of what drew me to this whole thing in the first place. I genuinely think that one of the most important purposes of art in general and music in particular is that when we engage it properly or at its highest level, it can actually help sharpen our discernment skills. It's like a sandbox that we get to play in. And when a little kid is playing in the sandbox, they don't know that they're learning. They're just having fun. But they are learning. They're learning how to negotiate with other kids. They're learning how their muscles work. They're learning all kinds of stuff. But they're having fun, and so they don't realize that they're learning. And I think that music is something where we're starting to learn about our tastes. We're exposed to other cultures. We're exposed to other ideas. We get to discern, do I agree with this or not? When I like this, why? When I don't like it, why? When we engage it on a deep level, art can help us become deeper thinkers, more critical thinkers, more empathetic. When we just consume it at the surface level, like eating food out of a vending machine or something, we miss that level. And when we're in a silo where all we ever hear is what we already like, and we don't have to discern anything anymore, like we miss that. And so what I loved about alternative records, what I loved about the exit records was there was music that had that spiritual dynamic, but it required some discernment. It honored or it rewarded deeper listening. And most Christian music did not. And so that seemed to play with those deeper purposes of what I think music was created to do. Now we look at multiple generations of people, especially in the church, but I think this is the same and outside of the church, that have grown up not exercising those muscles, not playing in that sandbox. And we go, oh, I wonder why it is that these people can't discern their way out of a wet paper bag. Well, partially at least, it's because they haven't played with art the way they should have. Like their imagination, their critical thinking hasn't had at least that opportunity to be sharpened, and they didn't realize that it's fun to argue with people when you can do it in love. And so they think that every time somebody disagrees with them, it's an attack, and they get their amygdala gets enraged and they have to fight.
Oh yeah, come on, this is Blues Power. It's the only way I know how to do it. Take you way back, beginning of time. Let's hear it. Well, I've got a po' boys plan. Yes, a sure shot, fellas, to get to Hollywood. I said I've got a po' boys plan. Yes, a sure shot, a good way to get to Hollywood. I know my plan is gonna work. Yes, because it's a common labor plan. Here's what I'm gonna do.
It was always important to me and I want you to understand this, that from the very start of what I conceived to be alternative records, this goes back to the mail order days, when I just imported and exported stuff, that I wanted to bring in music that could be discovered and understood and shared by people from across different life experiences. You didn't have to be a Christian to get this album. You just were going to enjoy it anyway, right? I mean, I'm sure there was an exception here and there, but by and large, I wanted to bring in stuff that was relatable across the globe. It was a time, and this is like very late 70s, early 80s. This is a time, remember, when U2 and The Alarm and all these bands, Simple Minds, The Call, were making music that anyone could relate to, right? They didn't have to be of a certain faith. And the bands themselves had that intentionality. They felt like their music could change the world, but they weren't going to be coming at you the same way as traditional, gospel, white gospel in particular, groups would have approached things. When I started doing records and I started discovering what Steve Scott was up to, of all people, the genius, I think that we have in this whole thing. What Steve Scott was up to and what the Sevens are up to, and that there was room for everybody in this boat. I mean, where you got on and got off was up to you, but it had to be relatable. That doesn't mean watered down. It means that for those that wanted to, as you talked about, as for those that wanted to dive in deeper, there's stuff to be found. For those who just wanted to rock, it's right there. Here's a great chorus. That was all very important to me, because in the end, I felt like God loved all of those people, and there was no exclusionary thing on God's part on what music that you were exposed to. And that's just one end of the arts I was interested in. And I still feel that way today. Unfortunately, like I said, if you pan out and look at what's happening in this country, politically, and also within the church, and unfortunately, when the church combines political guidelines, ways to be, it's sad. It dilutes what the original thing is all about.
Well, thank you guys. This has been really good, and Randy, we love you, and thank you for all of that stuff. And
well, thanks again for having me and my son on, Matt.
Yep, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, and
welcome to the family, Matt.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here, and look forward to much more in the future.
Thank you very much, and good night.
I'm not really sure if this counts as a soapbox per se, but before we wrap this one up, I want to propose a kind of toast, or I guess you could think of it as a blessing or benediction to Randy for all you have done for this community and are still doing. May the road rise to meet you, brother, and may the needle glide through your grooves with no static. And as I record this, I'm also thinking of our good friend and frequent contributor Brian Quincy Newcomb, who passed away in April of 2024. We also recently lost longtime friend and artist, the complicated genius Michael Knott, as well as another True Tunes writer and friend, Dan McIntosh. And that's just in the past few months. That's a lot of loss. What's a heart to do? We grieve. My friend, the late Brian Healy, was talking to me once on the phone when I was going through a very hard time regarding another loss. I was confused about my reaction to that one, and Brian said something like, grief is what happens when love has nowhere to go. We only feel the pain because we first felt the love. The losses are terrible, but the sadness has a sweetness to it because the circle of love is so rich and deep. So Randy, we love you. Thank you for the consistent friendship and care you have shown for so many of us. We hate the pain you have been going through and are still enduring. We grieve with you for the loss of that young, long-haired, rockin' and rollin', troublemaking kid. But we love that you've been a part of our lives. We love that you provided an alternative for us and your artists, because long before alternative became a genre tag, it just meant another way. All of us in this broken and battered tribe have lived richer lives because we got to live them together. We found our friends, our people. So here's to you, Randy. You did it for love, that's for sure. Okay, time to lower the curtain. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks again to the Laytons, of course, and to my brother and compatriot and favorite mixologist, Bruce Brown, for pulling the soundtrack to this together. I also want to send a special shout out to our Patreon backers, including our newest members, George Innes, Doug Waring, Brian Palmer, Noah Hall, Charles Baker, and Jonathan Verzal. We could not do this without your help and support. If you would like to join the group, head over to patreon.com/TrueTunes, or if you'd like to give us a one-time gift, you can find the PayPal link on the show notes page. You can also find links to my previous conversations with Randy there, and the link to the current funding campaign for Songs from the River House. If there is time, seriously, do not miss it. And thank you for doing all the other stuff, leaving us the ratings and reviews at Apple Podcasts, signing up for our email list, and subscribing to the weekly Spotify mixtape. And thank you to friends like Gar Sager and others who have helped curate the mix lately, as I have been consumed with my work as a student and as a teacher. That mix just keeps getting better and better. This podcast was written and produced by me, JJT, with co-production, editing, and sound design by Bruce A. Brown for Gyroscope Productions. Our theme song is a special instrumental mix of Full Circle by Phil Keggy and Rex Paul. The contents of this program are protected by U.S. copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exceptions of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten materials. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. This program is intended for the private use of our listening audience. Gyroscope Productions can be reached at jjt@truetunes.com or P.O. Box 60401, Nashville, Tennessee 37206. Until next time, this is JJT reminding you to stay tuned and stay true, because there is a way out. Peace.
It's just a little cough. Leave that in, though. Randy will understand. I have about 10,000 things to say about Layton. But the main thing I want to say is that Randy saw the future, the whole sort of DIY future, and he probably saw it easily 10, 15, maybe 20 years before everyone else did. After having several record deals with big companies, big Christian companies anyway, and a few near misses with a secular company or two. The 77s were at the point where we didn't really know what to do next, and Randy sent me a little bit of money and said, why don't you record some songs, 3 or 4 songs, and let me put them out. And at the time I thought, well, this is kind of small time. But what I didn't realize is that it would drive us to a way of being and doing that would inform our future. And indeed, here we are in 2023 doing the exact same thing. Essentially, Randy saw that a very legitimate way to work was to simply do it yourself. The way that he was doing it and doing it successfully for himself and the artists that he chose to work with was a good paradigm. So I'm very grateful to him, not only for that, but for just years of friendship and being able to call him anytime and talk about the minutia of some new Brian Wilson recording or some obscure jazz artist. He really does live, eat, and breathe music. And I really appreciate friends like that because I don't have too many of those. A few, but I would say Randy's right up there in the top 5, if not the top guy. So, Randy, here's to you.
Are we recording?